All right, it's 6 o'clock, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. It is our pleasure to introduce David Yoken and to have a session on supply chain. I always felt like this was a gap that we were not covering in our Incubate Vegas instruction. So I'm so happy to have David and welcome him.
Thanks, Maggie.
Usually at the beginning of each session, we give a couple of people the opportunity to talk about their business, and this is in sort of preparation of getting them used to speaking in public about their business. And so I'm going to randomly call on Fred. Fred, call. Can you unmute and tell us what's the most interesting thing that you've learned during your sessions here with Incubate Vegas?
Okay, yes, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
There's really actually a lot that I've learned. I really like the steps that you guys are really walking us through on how to create a business. I myself, I have a product that's kind of in its second, almost third year, but these steps that you guys have really clearly laid out week by week are incredible because they're very clear. And I think you guys have boiled them down to the raw essence of what people need. And there's two things I think that stick out to me personally. The business canvas model, that was fantastic. That one still sticks out. I've been sharing that with people. Like, you've got to look at this and go through this exercise, and the feedback has been great. Also, last week, the financial presentation was really outstanding. I've got to go back and are you guys going to put that whole presentation up? Like on YouTube or something, or
Should be. I'll check on that. But yes, the intention is to get it up there.
yeah, I would like to go back and review that again because she gave so much information that it was incredible. So those two, the financial and I think the business canvas, really stick out in my mind. Really good.
Okay, thank you for that. And who else? Well, Gabby, you're on an iPhone. What would you like to share tonight? I know when you're on the phone, it's harder to find the buttons to unmute yourself. And you could also be at work. It could be difficult for you. Just let me know if it's not going to work. All right, then let's go to Margarita Ramos.
Hello.
Hi, did you hear the question that I asked?
No.
Okay, so the question was, what have you learned? What's been most interesting that you've picked up during these Incubate Vegas sessions?
I think for me, and I joined because I am wanting to start a business. I'm not ready to start it. So to go through this class and just listen and to be able to go back and listen is going to be tremendous. But as far as the financials were the one that just intrigued me because there's so much to do, so much to know. That's the one. So I've learned a lot, but that's the one that's sticking out going, okay, I really need to make sure I have a solid base in my financials before I can even consider moving forward. So that's it.
All right, thank you. How about we'll do one more, Nalisa? Are you with us, Nalisa? All right, well then, in that case, David, thank you again for being a mentor for us and for preparing this supply chain presentation for us. I'm so excited to hear it. So will you do your own background?
Sure, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound good. And we can see your slides
right.
too.
Wonderful. So, hey everyone, glad to be here. I am a mentor for Startup Vegas, but in my professional life, I'm a supply chain consultant as well as other endeavors. So supply chain management can be something that's a little bit dry, and I'm going to try to make this fun and interesting with a lot of opportunity to jump in with questions. So let's get into it. In terms of what we're talking about here, it is a bag of overflowing money. That's the way to think about supply chain. This is a way to make more profit in your business. In terms of what we'll talk about today, I'll briefly talk about myself and my experience, talk about what is a supply chain, why should we care, and then I'll get into the 5 steps of supply chain management, an overview and key takeaways of those, and then I'll leave you with a recap. And there'll be plenty of opportunity to jump into the chat throughout again, want to make this as interactive and fun as possible. So first, a little bit about me. In addition to being a mentor for Incubate Vegas, I'm a director at Alvarez & Marcel, which is a global consulting firm, technically based in LA, although I live here. I have done everything in my consulting career, from supply chain optimization, growth strategy, AI implementation, analytics, digital strategy, go-to-market planning, whole lot of financial modeling. I've worked in a lot of different industries. Consumer goods is one of them, industrial products, pharmaceuticals, real estate, agriculture, quite a few. Prior to getting back into consulting, I built a startup, which is part of my interest in Incubate Vegas and Angel Envy and Startup Envy. We built an engine for space-based AI. So we process satellite imagery using proprietary algorithms to solve problems for customers in a variety of industries. During that time, I did everything from business development, marketing, sales, product strategy, you name it. I was the first employee at a company that we took from $0 all the way through Series A and eventually acquisition. So that got acquired a couple of years ago, and I moved back to Vegas, where I'm originally from, Charlottesville, Virginia, where I've been living. I am from Vegas originally, went to high school here at Bonanza, right up the street from CSN, where we do our sessions. And so it's especially fun to be here talking about my professional endeavors here with you all. So jumping into supply chain, and this is the first time that I'm going to ask you to put something into the chat. Can anyone say what they think the map on the right is? It'd be a more typical supply chain diagram. No takers. How about on the left? Import, export from Hesh, yeah. So it's a map of product flow from distribution centers to customers. It's an actual client of mine moving pharmaceuticals last summer. And this is what people usually think about when they think about supply chain. It's sort of a rote, dry application. But then I would ask, who recognizes the image on the left? And what would that depict? Circulatory system. Thank you, Maggie. In a sense, that's also a supply chain, right? And as you're starting to think more about supply chain, I want you to get out of this idea of this sort of dry, inorganic system to organic flows. And so that's why I wanted to start with this example. So if we take that to a standard industry model, I think it'll start to bring together some of the ideas of what is a supply chain. So this is the supply chain operations reference model. I've used this in professional life. I've seen it in my MBA. The 5 steps that we're looking at here are going to be anchors for us in our understanding of what a supply chain is. So the first step in all of this is to plan, figuring out what to sell and how much to sell. Particularly in these early stages that we're in the incubator, that includes both design of the product and the forecast of it. Step 2, source product, obtaining materials to make your stuff. This could be getting ingredients, this could be buying parts, or getting the necessary labor in order to deliver your service. Step 3 is make. So you take those raw materials and you create value from them. In the case of a fudge business, you're taking chocolate, butter, milk, and you're bringing that together into a finished product. Step 4 is fulfillment, and that's where you get the value to the customers. This is your Amazon, your UPS, you're moving that product to its endpoint. And step 5, arguably the most important step of the supply chain, it's sometimes called service, sometimes called return. I like to call it retain. And that means that last step of the supply chain where you're managing your returns and you're keeping your customers happy. Thinking back to our same circulatory system model, I'll try to apply the circulatory system to SCORE. So this is the supply chain of oxygenation. In the plan step would be your brain thinks about how deep of a breath to take. How many oxygen molecules do I need in this moment? You're sourcing that air with your lungs. You're bringing that into the supply chain, into that circulatory path. Make means that you're combining oxygen and red blood cells. You're putting your product together. And then fulfilling, you're pumping that blood to your organs and then returning that blood to your lungs. Now, oxygenation is not usually what people talk about with supply chain. I'm intentionally bringing that up again to say that supply chains are everywhere. It's not just this dry system it's not just a dry system, it's organic. It's something that flows. And for that reason, I want to bring up 3 different modes of thinking about supply chain against this same SCORE model, which again is an industry standard way of thinking about this. So every business has a supply chain: physical products, services, and digital products. In the case of physical products, you're probably more familiar with these ideas. In your plan step, you're forecasting how much inventory you're going to need of each type of product that you're going to be selling in a given period. In your sourcing step, you're going to be ordering those materials, the butter and cocoa for your fudge. You're then bringing those together in your make step, which is usually more of an assembling and a packaging, bringing together of those ingredients. And then you're shipping it out in the fulfill step, and you're managing the returns in the retain step. This is the type of supply chain that is used by every company for every physical product that you come into contact with: tables, chairs, candy, soda, whatever it is. There are supply chain managers out there that are managing each of these steps. Now, in our incubator, we're not all physical products. And so throughout this talk, I'm going to try to use examples from other domains, such as services. So services businesses have a supply chain as well. In your plan stage for services, you're planning capacity. If you're running a software engineering firm, you're figuring out how many of which type of developer you need for which month and when you're going to deploy them. You're hiring those people. That's sort of your materials that you're sourcing. You're making value by training those employees in a services company. You're fulfilling that value by delivering service to customers. Again, fulfillment is the step of delivering value to customers. And then in retain, you're addressing complaints, and you're managing support services. Similarly for digital products, this is even more controversial, I would say, but digital companies have a supply chain too. So when you think about the plan phase of a digital business, you're designing and setting the roadmap for the company. You're figuring out, what are we going to build this quarter? I know in my startup, that was always contentious. We always had long discussions about what features we ship when. No different than forecasting inventory of a physical product that you're going to move. In sourcing, you're hiring the developers, you're hiring the tools that you're going to use to create that digital feature. Make is writing code. It's actually creating the product. Fulfill is shipping that product in the software sense, not necessarily physically, but you're shipping it live into prod. And then of course, retain in this sense is what's called customer success. It's making sure that your customers are happy, you're managing complaints, and you're getting people into actually staying in your ecosystem, being happy customers, where you're getting that feedback loop that makes the retain step so important. So I wanted to ask the group, with that understanding of what a supply chain is, how does supply chain management impact your business? Are there instances that you've run into in your company where you found that you haven't had enough product to ship, where you haven't had enough opportunity to create value for your customers? Feel free to put into the chat, and either we can talk about it here, or if we don't get any takers, I'll come back to it at the end. Paula says, yes, during COVID, couldn't find packaging. Perfect. That is an issue that happens even in large companies. I did a project for Nestle a few years ago where all that we were focusing on was the packaging, because for consumer goods, that is a big part of the sale. Writing the product, absolutely. Making sure we have enough drivers, absolutely. So these are 3 examples that we've sourced so far, that one's a physical product, one's a services business, and one is a digital product. So as you start to think about this, you'll realize that these principles apply in each type of business, depending on one manufacturer, another key issue. So why should we care? And I'm going to give 2 answers to this. This is the practical answer that I think most entrepreneurs care about. Basically, faster, cheaper, simpler. The better that you can manage your supply chain, the easier your business is to run, and the more cost and the more money you make at the end of the day. Supply chain sort of sits in between this golden triangle. And as you start to apply more advanced practices, you'll take out waste in the business and you'll see more productivity, whether it is whatever type of business that it might be. And then this is the finance version. So I know we talked in a couple of classes about finance principles, and I wanted to bring it up here to again drill home the basic ideas of financial management. So first, on the income statement, you have your revenue, and then what's in your revenue. And there's 3 parts to that, if you really simplify it. 1 is your net income, which is your take-home profit. 2 is your cost of goods sold, which is your direct labor, your materials, everything that goes into actually making that product. And then 3 is your operating expenses or your overhead. So why should we care about supply chain? Well, it basically moves cost of goods sold to net income, or it turns these red bricks into green waves. The more that you're able to apply sound management to the supply chain of your business, the less COGS and the more income. And then on the balance sheet side, as a refresher, your balance sheet is basically assets equal equity plus liabilities. So your assets are going to be made up of, to simplify it, cash, inventories, receivables, which are the bills that you're owed, and equipment. And that must balance with your equity, which is going to be your retained earnings and your invested capital, plus your payables, the money you owe, and your debt. And really, supply chain works on your inventories, meaning that you get more out of the money that you have in the company, widely referred to as working capital efficiency. And over time, that means that your retained earnings go up, which means that your equity in your company is more valuable. So next, I'm going to jump into each of these tenets of the supply chain and plan, source, make, fulfill, retain. I'll provide an overview of what it means to think about each of these steps, and then some key takeaways for you and some learnings on how to structure this for your business. So first is planning. And for each of these 5 phases of the SCORE model, I have 5 drill down steps to think about and to research further if you want to get better at doing this. So under planning, the first thing to think about is market research and demand forecasting. We've had lessons on this in the incubator so far. This is where you're talking about understanding your market, your personas, your ICP, figuring out who's going to buy your product and why, and then trying to predict demand. I'll talk in a moment here about developing a forecast, but this is the most important thing to know if you're going to be building capacity in order to meet demand. So demand forecasting is critical for scaling your business. Then resource planning and capacity assessment. So knowing what you have, that could be finances, personnel, technology, and then what is the capacity that you need in order to meet that demand. Trying to be more proactive will allow you to be more agile as your business continues to ebb and flow. And then supply chain strategy. what is the best supply chain for what you're trying to do. There's different ways to build what you're doing. You could have diverse supplier base, you could be just in time, many different ways to prioritize what you're looking at. And there's usually a fit for purpose for each type of model that you might build. And partnerships are obviously a big part of that. So this is where you'd be thinking about who those suppliers are that you'd work with, who the fulfillment partners might be, and figuring out those third parties that really make your business go. Risk management and contingency planning. You hear supply chain people talk about risk all the time, especially in larger companies. They're thinking 3 orders of magnitude ahead of what are the risks to the company and how do we proactively manage them. So thinking about those vulnerabilities, whether it's a market fluctuation you might be subject to, supplier dependencies, trying to identify those risks proactively in order to take them out of the business. A big part of this planning phase is moving towards proactive planning. It's understanding where those risks may come from and then how we can get ahead of those so that the business operates smoothly. In my professional experience and my personal experience, planning is what makes things go smoothly. It's never just an accident. And then finally, performance metrics. So supply chain folks are big on KPIs, understanding whether it's like your lead times, cost efficiency, customer satisfaction. Knowing what those KPIs are allows you to prioritize them and allows you to modify behaviors in order to improve those KPIs. So when we think about planning, the key takeaways would really be related to archery, right? As a forecaster, you're not always going to hit the mark, but it's about getting as many close to that golden circle as you can. So step 1, decide what to sell and design it. I know in our case here in the incubator, there's a lot of this going on, and that's great because that's where all the creativity is happening in the planning process. Once you have that design built, don't be afraid to start with a guess. When you're thinking about what you're going to sell, you're not going to know ahead of time, and guessing is okay. Use that guess, make a forecast, probably a moving average, which I'll talk about here in a moment, and then track what you sell. Figure out each month which SKUs did well that month, whether that's a type of service delivery, a type of product, a type of feature, and then measure the variability and accuracy with which you are predicting those, and then circle it back. And if you do that every month, I guarantee you'll make more money. So when we think about a forecast, and we should all think about a forecast, the first place to start is a moving average. So this is going to be a little bit academic, and I want you to stick with me here for a moment. This will be on the slides that we send out later. But I want everyone to get a sense of what it means to create a forecast. So you'll see in the first column here, SKU. That is called a stock keeping unit. That's a unique item that you're selling. In the case of a fudge business, that would be like a 1/4 pound of peppermint mango, and you're selling that as one unit. Now your peanut butter would be a different item, and typically this goes with the packaging. So I'm only doing 3 SKUs here. Big companies might have 100. The benchmark for a normal grocery store is about 50,000. So when you walk into a grocery store, they have about 50,000 unique items. Your business probably has more or less, but that's what it's called, stock keeping unit. It's the basis of operations. I've created some mock data here for actual sales of that product over a 6-month period. Just made it up for the sake of the example. And I wanted to talk about how you create a forecast on this. So the first month is a complete guess. So your forecast for your first month, you're going to guess, okay, 15 of each, and then we see how it goes. Following that, your month 2 is going to be your month 1 actuals. So you see 10, 20, and 4, 10, 20, and 4. And then going forward is where you start to get a little bit more prediction. So in month 3, you're doing an average of month 2 and month 1. So for SKU B, for example, you can see that 20 and 22 come together for a forecast of 21. Doing this is going to start to take variability out of your forecast and to make it closer to what you're selling. Then as you move forward, you get into doing a 3-month rolling average. And I would recommend the 3-month rolling average for most of the people, most of the businesses that we're talking about here. So you see, you take 10, 15, and 10, that averages together to be about 12. And you roll it forward, 15, 10, and 5 becomes 10. And you can do this just on an ongoing basis. As you start building your business, having a forecast is important, not because you want to be able to say, oh, I can predict the future. It becomes the basis for your company. It becomes the basis for how much materials do I buy. It becomes the basis for how much can I expect to bring in cash flows. So how much debt can I take on if I take on debt, or how much investment can I expect? If you don't have a forecast in your business, you don't really have potential to have sound operations. This next part is going to get a little bit wonkier, and I just want to say this so that somebody might be interested in the crowd. Forecast accuracy is something that you can measure using the Excel formula I have here on the slide. 1 minus the absolute value of the actual minus the forecast over the actual. So in the case of SKU A, for example, for month 6, forecast accuracy, 12 minus 10 over 12, 83% accuracy. Pretty good. And you can see with the arrow chart here at the bottom, anything above 80% for forecast accuracy is really good. And when you think about a large scale consumer goods company like a Nestle or a Campbell's or any of these other big ones, that is great. And there's lots of advanced techniques out there for demand sensing and really fun stuff that I enjoy working on to get past that. But for what we're talking about here, getting to 80% or better is nice. Now, when you're lower on the scale, closer to the challenge level, you want to be thinking about how can I improve my accuracy? Sometimes that means talking to suppliers. Sometimes that means being a little bit more right-brained, qualitative with what you're doing. And then variability. And this is something that is a little bit more advanced. It corresponds more to the extra credit around ABC, XYZ analysis. But basically, if you measure the ratio of the standard deviation of your actual sales over the average of your actual sales, you'll be able to tell how predictable those sales are. Anything over 1 in that ratio means it's going to be hard to predict, and you should minimize those SKUs. I'm not going to touch too much on this. I wanted to include it so people can follow up and research it. But variability is a more advanced supply chain practice that will yield a lot of results, especially as you get a little bit more advanced into your company. Step 2, sourcing. And this is usually what people think about when they think about supply chain. I personally am more of a planning guy, and I've done a lot more work in that area, but sourcing is critical for managing your cost of goods sold, particularly as you're getting started. So first step on that is identify and vet suppliers. So in order to do that, you're figuring out exactly what you need, what are the materials, services, or technologies that your startup might require, figuring out who those vendors are that actually sell those materials, and then leveraging networks, talking to other people in the incubator, asking around, doing your own online research, figuring out who those high quality partners might be. Step 2, negotiate and establish agreements. That's where you're setting your terms and your pricing. Try to get good payment terms, try to get longer term contracts, try to get flexibility in terms of your supplier relationships. Step 3 is plan and manage. So you always want to have clear expectations from your suppliers on the quality that's required, the timeline that you expect, and the logistics of getting those products to you. It could include implementing scorecards. So this is something that I've done with clients. I did a project at Nestle where we scored all of Nestle's suppliers on how well they did across a variety of parameters. Keep track on who does well across a few KPIs, and it'll yield a lot of results, and it'll help you in your negotiations with them on your unit cost. Receive, inspect, and validate inputs. That's really about quality control, understanding like how good the stuff is that's coming in the door, and making sure that you're monitoring the efficiency with which you're receiving deliveries. And over time, optimizing and scaling your supplier strategy. So that's diversifying your supplier base, leveraging data for improvements, looking at data over time to know when and how you should be getting better pricing, when you've hit certain volume thresholds, keeping track of all of that so you can negotiate with those suppliers. In terms of the key takeaways for sourcing, a lot of people think about it as a lemon squeezing exercise. They think about how can I push pressure my supplier as much as I can in order to, get all the juice out of the citrus that I'm buying from them. And that's one way to think about it, but ultimately it's a little myopic. A more advanced way of thinking about it is rivers. So suppliers are your tributaries and you are the river. This is a flow, right? Supply chains are not discrete things. You're looking at over time, how do I get a healthy flow into my river of good quality water? And so our key takeaways here are: one, start small with test purchases, test and learn always with everything, figure out how and when you're going to get product from which suppliers. Think about long-term reliability. If you get a supplier that's going to give you a great unit cost tomorrow, but it's going to cost you a lot of time to go find another supplier the next week because that first supplier can't manage your levels, it's not worth it, right? Think about long-term, the partners that you want to have in your business. Consider having redundant suppliers. You never know what's going to happen with a given partner. Build relationships. So don't just look at this as a transactional exercise. Think about how you can actually get value and grow with a supplier over time, not just extracting value from them through lower unit costs. And negotiate more than price. So this is like payment terms can be huge for a business. If you get 60 days to pay and you're collecting 30 days, you're generating a very favorable cash cycle. And a lot of times that can be more valuable than just a lower unit cost. So think holistically about your partners. Don't think about just how much can I squeeze out of one transaction. Think about who are the partners that enable you to have a healthy business and a business that will grow. You want this to be beneficial, and you don't want to just squeeze them as much as you can. And ultimately, we don't have volume in this room to be able to squeeze the partners anyway. So think about those healthy relationships that will enable you to continue to grow your business. Make. This is probably my favorite step of the process. This is where the value is created. So in Make, first thing we're thinking about are the workflows. How is value made? And in a manufacturing context, this could be the set and sequence of machines that are put together in order to make a finished product. In a services workflow, this could be the training steps that you go through to get your people trained up on whatever it is that you're selling. In a software company, this could be writing code and the steps that you go through to write code, your bug fix process, all that. And it's those cycles that you want to be able to manage. Develop and execute the offering means actually go out and do it, right? Execute the process, measure how it goes, develop the product. Optimize resource and efficiency. This is over time understanding how you can get more out of the process with less. That could be through automation, where you're using technology to enhance your productivity. It could be incorporating AI to write your code for you. It could be a variety of different automation potential. Also means monitoring costs, understanding within your make process how labor, materials, and overhead are performing, right? You don't want to go over your budget when you're making stuff because that'll kill your margins on your product. So you're constantly balancing scalability and quality. As you move up and you start to deliver more, you have to be able to rigorously manage the quality with which you deliver those products. And in a physical case, that means you're inspecting your goods for defects, making sure they meet all the safety regulatory compliances. For services, you're talking to your customers, ensuring that you have consistent client experiences, that your training is the same every time, that your processes are optimized and consistent. For software, it's unit testing, it's understanding UAT, it's understanding the integrations that you have and the risks of open source dependencies, and then refine and scale. So ultimately, you want to get into a customer feedback loop where you're gathering user insights to improve your offerings. That allows you to increase capacity so that you can continue to meet demand as it grows. And automation is sort of the fuel for this. Now, all that said, for where we're talking about today, there's 3 key takeaways for Make. And the first that I want to emphasize is that Make means create value. It doesn't mean manufacture necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean stamp out a bunch of things that look identical. You can call it assemble, package, build, train, fabricate, construct, synthesize, write, code, create. The key is that you're creating value at each step. So when you're building product, whatever that product or service might be, think about what those process steps are and make sure that you're generating value with each of them. If anyone's heard of Lean Six Sigma or Kaizen, these are techniques that are used to eradicate waste from the manufacturing process. You can use that stuff in services as well. And I mean, it even applies to making art, as you see in the picture. Number 2 on this is quality counts. And I would recommend that you just start with 1 metric and stick with it. First pass yield is a very common manufacturing metric for how many of the product are made right the first time as a percentage of how many total are made. But you could even use things like Net Promoter Score and customer satisfaction to measure the effectiveness of your quality control and your quality management. And third is make to stock generally. There are different ideas about make to stock versus make to order. For what we're talking about here, I'd recommend make to order for a lot of the businesses, particularly around services. But think about whether you're going to be making stuff and stocking it somewhere in preparation for future delivery, or if you're going to wait for those orders to come in. And this can make sense in either direction for certain businesses, but I would just recommend being deliberate about which of the 2 paths you're following. Fulfill. So this, I think, is one of the more interesting steps in the process. This is where you think about big warehouses full of stuff, but it has quite a few other steps to it. So order management and customer interface. This is part of your fulfillment step. So some of you will be setting up websites where you take orders, and that is an important feature of your business. Whether it's you have some EDI set up and you have full automation with it, or you're taking orders over the phone, think about how you're getting those orders in, because managing the flow of orders is another quick path to profit. Getting that efficient is going to bring in a lot more business in the door. Figure out how you can streamline it, figure out how you can automate it, and then manage the customer expectations associated with it. Provide clear timelines, provide clear pricing, and make sure customers know when your product is available. Plan and optimize logistics. So for physical products, this could mean determining shipping methods. This could mean whether you're going direct to consumer through a retail distribution model, through a 3PL, through UPS, through FedEx. For services, it's how are we going to actually get that service to the customer? What is the process by which we're going to be able to do that? And for software, it's everything about through your hosting, your cloud deployment. What are the logistics of actually shipping product to whoever's buying it? And that could be you're shipping it to your own cloud, but still thinking through what those logistics are. This is the step in supply chain where that comes into play. Inventory and supply flow management is the key step here when you think about fulfillment. So 3 things I would touch on here are stock optimization. So you want to have optimal inventory levels to balance demand and costs. And I'll have an example of that here shortly. You want to be allocating your digital and service resources. So whether that's your staff, the bandwidth that you have, your computing power, to make sure that you're seamlessly delivering each time to the customer. And then feeding data back to your forecasting process. So knowing what you have on the shelf helps you understand when to reorder. Of course, execution and delivery, step 4. So in the case of physical products, this is pack, ship, and track. For services, you're ensuring service execution based on customer needs. You're shipping that service to the customer, so to speak. And for software, you're enabling fast, secure, and reliable product access with minimal downtime. And finally, customer satisfaction. And you have probably seen this pop up a few times in the presentation so far, and that's deliberate. Customer satisfaction and feedback are critical inputs for supply chain management. It comes into your planning, your sourcing, your making, your fulfilling, and your retaining. Thinking about the customer and keeping them happy is critical throughout this whole process. So in terms of key takeaways on this, you'll see on the left here the same distribution map that I pulled up earlier. This is actually the back of my head as a picture taken in a supply chain assessment that I did a couple years ago for a large pharmaceutical distributor, where we measured their picking time, meaning how long it takes to get an order off the shelf into a box, onto a conveyor belt, and out to the customer, by actually going in and picking stuff off the shelves. This was a customer that had a complex supply chain. They're the ones that ship the COVID vaccines, as well as a ton of different generic drugs and a variety of other products. All that blue inventory you see there that goes on for miles was just gloves. It was just cheap gloves that one of their suppliers landed in one of their warehouses and they had to hang on to for years. And their distribution manager hated it. But it just, these things happen at a huge scale out in the world. And all of them follow these same basic principles that I'm teaching to you here. So under fulfillment, there's 3 things that I want you to take away from the chart at the right. The first and the most important one is know what you have. And this can be in an Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be in some advanced warehouse management system, but know how much of each product you have. It goes with the forecasting idea of know what you're going to sell. If you know what you have and you know the demand per day, then you can get to step 2. And getting to step 2 here makes you more advanced than most private equity portfolio companies that I've come across. And that is measure your inventory in days. So for SKU A here, I have 100 in stock. There's 10 demanded per day. That means that I have 10 days on hand. Inventory days on hand, critical metric for any business that's making to stock. And I'll tell you from experience, it's something that a lot of businesses don't think about. A lot of businesses don't think this way, but if you can make it all time-based, then you can get to step 3, which is set your reorder point equal to your lead time. So for SKU A, we know that it takes 2 days to get another shipment in from that supplier. For SKU B, it takes 2 days to get that shipment in from that supplier. For SKU C, it takes 10 days to get another shipment in from that supplier. And that means that we should reorder SKU C. And this is sort of a golden rule. If you can get to this point in your supply chain management, you're doing a pretty good job. And again, this is more applicable to businesses that stock inventory, but the same principles apply to a services business where you're trying to manage your headcount and who's working on what, setting that reorder point equal to your lead time creates a lot of smoothness in the way that you're delivering value to your customers. Relates to step 4, which is excess is greater than out of stock. And this is something that you don't want to apply to a ridiculous degree because you don't want to spend too much money on your inventory. But especially for our businesses here in the incubator that are just getting started, we don't want to miss sales, because missing a sale probably means your customer goes to a competitor, probably means that they become loyal to a competitor, and you lose that opportunity to generate business with that customer going forward. So aim a little bit on the side of carrying excess. Yeah.
So in SKU-A, would you reorder at like 30 when you say you have 30 left on? Not happening, right? So even though you're not in 2 days, you still want a buffer.
So yeah, question in the room is how much buffer to have. So for SKU-A, if your lead time is 2 days, do you order 30, which is 3 days, or do you order 40? 30 is probably good, so you have a little bit of buffer. You'd want to look at the variability with which that demand fluctuates, but you don't want to go up to 60 is really the point. So you're not having too much, but you do want to have a little bit of safety stock. So it depends on if you're going to spike up and by how much. So think about having safety stock is the supply chain term for it. So you want to maintain some safety stock so that during the lead time, you're burning that down and then replenishing up past that. Does that make sense? And then number 5, ship and deliver what's demanded. So get that right. Make sure that you're getting the stuff that your customers want to them, get it there on time. Number 5, and getting towards the end here, is retain. So in the actual supply chain operations reference model that I'm adapting for this, which is something that y'all can check out online, it's a rich source of research. Operations research is a whole field of academic study. There's a lot to learn here. But a few things to think about in the retain services, which is called return or service in the SCORE model. So first is establish clear return and support policies. Make sure that for your physical products, your customers know what return, exchange, and refund looks like. In services businesses, you want to be able to offer some kind of guarantee around client satisfaction. You want to make sure that clients are coming back and that they're happy, and if they aren't, that you know. In the software world, troubleshooting, support, refund terms, execute reverse logistics. So that means as a physical product company, how do you accept returns? What's the system for that? In a case of consumable goods, if somebody doesn't like something, maybe provide a replacement. That's part of your reverse logistics. In the services world, it means how do you modify bookings or you get follow-up support. And software, again, customer support, etc. Step 3, track and manage service requests. So that could mean a ticketing system, CRM, could mean having self-service FAQs on your website, video tutorials, even using AI for support. Ensuring quick response times is important here. If you're operating a services business or really any type of business, you want to have a short SLA to your customers. Analyze trends and prevent issues. So making sure that you can monitor common problems, like your laptop running out of battery. Implementing proactive fixes, meaning adjusting product designs, service offerings, or product features. And then finally, enhancing customer experience and loyalty. So think about how your customer experience makes you money over time. Think about how the opportunity to serve a customer is the opportunity to win that customer as future business. And use feedback for continuous improvement. Being able to adapt processes based on customer insights will help you avoid future issues. Some key takeaways for retain. One is invest. Don't be afraid to put a little bit of money into servicing customers effectively. You'll get a return, pun intended. You'll get money out of that. And it's something that over time will help your business to grow. Number two is make your customer lifetime value exceed your customer acquisition costs. And this is just a good business principle overall, but make sure that over the lifetime with which a customer is operating or is with your company, that they're getting more out of it than it costs you to acquire them. This simple heuristic that you see here is a ratio of your customer lifetime value to your customer acquisition costs. If that ratio is less than 1, your business is probably going to fail over time. If that ratio is greater than 5, your business is probably going to explode over time. And a lot of that has to do with this retain step of the cycle of the supply chain. And I highlighted Zappos here because they're a business that doesn't do anything particularly special, you know, they sell shoes, but as a local company, they've been able to continue to grow profitably because of great service. Because when you call Zappos, you know you're going to talk to a person and they're going to care about your issue because they invest in that. They don't just sell shoes, they sell a customer experience. And finally, enable the virtuous cycle. So customer relationships that you build through this retain step mean better feedback, which means that you can plan, make, fulfill better. So one of the most important inputs to a supply chain isn't just the materials you get from your supplier or the signal you get from your markets, although those are important. It's the feedback you get from customers. Your customers in the market tell you what to plan for, what to make, how to deliver it. And having those customer relationships is a critical input in order to be able to do that productively. So to wrap up here, why should we care? Because supply chain's like a big overflowing bag of money, and it will help you to be more profitable in your business. It's faster, cheaper, simpler. In finance terms, you can think of it as working capital efficiency or less COGS, more cash. Basically, over time, you'll be able to create more efficiency in your business. You're wasting less time, you're wasting less money, and you have more money that you retain as profit, as equity. Every business has a supply chain, and good supply chain management is good business management. Key takeaways by step. To reiterate, on the plan step, have a forecast. Start thinking that way. Whether your forecast is right or not, doesn't matter at first. You'll get there over time. But if you don't have a forecast, then you can't plan your business and you can't grow. So have a forecast and track what you sell. On sourcing, think long-term, prioritize reliability, prioritize supplier relationships. Don't be squeezing the lemon. Think of it as tributaries and rivers. On the make step, create value at each step. Whether you're painting and making unique art, or you're shipping software products, or you're building fudge and sending it to customers around the world, make sure that each step of that process is value generating. Fulfill, know what you have in days and days demanded, and then set that reorder point equal to your lead time. You can add safety stock on top of that if you want, but just build that relationship between demand and reorder. And then on service or retain, maximize your customer lifetime value. Think of your retain step as a valuable tool to build value in your business. And that's it. So this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out with any questions, or I'm typically at CSN on Wednesdays for the sessions.
David, there's a question in chat. What systems other than CRM and automation for a tax planning business? I think she's asking what other systems does she need? Can you hear me?
Yeah, are you on, Sharika?
Yeah, so I want to know, other than like setting up automations for follow-up text messages and emails, I have Go High Level for a CRM. Is there any other thing that you would recommend to make the customer journey experience flow better?
Do you have a forecasting system in place, and how do you plan your delivery of your services?
So delivery is they get it by email unless they're local. Then I go over it with them, but I don't have a forecasting system. It's the first time I heard of that one.
But do you have how do you know which customers you're working with on a given day? Is it
So
just sort of as it comes in?
yeah, as it comes in, but it varies. But I've been trying to do marketing because I have a set goal.
Yep.
But yeah, it just seems, people, I think they just throw marketing. I don't know. It's just, I think they kind of use marketing too loosely for me because I done spent thousands of dollars in ads, Facebook marketing, even Google marketing. So I'm just trying to get the wording together. But my niche is truck drivers, daycare providers, and real estate investors.
Okay. So those three that you mentioned, truck drivers, real estate investors, and daycare providers, those would sort of be the SKUs that I had on that chart of who and of your type of unique product that you're offering. So the system that I would recommend building, and it doesn't have to be even a software or anything, it could just be something that you do in Excel or to start, would be setting goals for each of those and then standardizing the services that you're providing. So figuring out for each of those three providers, how long does it typically take me? Because for a daycare provider, how long does that take? For a real estate professional, how long does that take? And then being able to feed that back into your marketing so that you can plan an appropriate mix of those three SKUs. So I wouldn't say necessarily that you need to go out and get a new system or pay for new software, but try to implement some standardized planning around each of these product types or service offerings that you're putting out there in the market.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback.
David, do you think the NPS would help a business like hers?
Sure. Yeah. Great point, Maggie. So NPS meaning Net Promoter Score.
Net Promoter Score. Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend that for every company, honestly. So Net Promoter Score is basically you ask your client whether or not, on a 1 to 10 scale, how likely are they to recommend you to someone
With
else?
somebody else. Okay.
Yeah, and getting that type of feedback will allow you to see, okay, this job didn't go so well. I wonder why that is. And then you can feed back in over time.
Okay. Can you restate that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I'm going to put it in the chat too.
Okay.
So Net Promoter Score is a great example of a quality metric. So I talked earlier in the presentation about having a quality metric that allows you to plan more effectively. And Net Promoter Score is basically you ask your customer on a 1 to 10 scale, how likely are they to recommend you to a friend? And just having that 1 to 10 number for each client, if you track that, whether it's just in a spreadsheet or even just writing it down, you'll be able to start to correlate it with certain types of jobs. So maybe daycare providers are not as happy, whereas real estate professionals are much happier. So that allows you to change the make step of your process where you're figuring out what actually is going on in that process to be able to then bring in more clients.
Okay.
Looks like Nina had a question.
Yeah, so she says she thinks your presentation was wonderful. She's struggling to apply it to transitional housing. Would I apply the SKU to the client I am working with? Right now, I only have one client. So how should she think about that?
Are you on, Nina? Could you tell me more about your transitional housing business?
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, David, I should have reached out to you on the side, but I thought it might be helpful. So in my case, I have a fourplex and I
Okay.
use each of the units, but the client, which I have an MOU with, primarily uses them at will. So at times, given the size of the family, they could be using the 2 bedroom or a 3 bedroom or what have you, but it's, on a 30-day basis and not more than 90 days. So I have a pretty set time frame, but I'm not sure how, if I decided I wanted to deal with a different agency or the city in specific, or I wanted to be able to rotate them a little bit more, how should I future plan for that based on what you presented tonight?
So I would think about the demand for the units. So you have a fourplex that is currently, you said, occupied by an agency. Is that right?
Yes, I primarily work with one of the larger nonprofits here. And so they
Okay.
place for like emergency or transitional use at this juncture. We haven't gotten to a place where I'm doing like permanent supportive housing. So I guess that would technically be a different avenue. But in the moment for where we're at right now, it is typically not more than 90 days, whether it's them or anybody else.
I see. And how do you typically acquire? Do they have exclusivity with your fourplex, or?
They don't have exclusivity, but we have kind of been in an exclusive relation. It's like being a boyfriend and a girlfriend. No, I'm just kidding. We're not like married, but we're sort
Yeah.
of, in a dating space, if you will. And primarily they always use it, but there have been months where it hasn't been as high, which has me exploring other options.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out how to think of that from a forecasting way.
Yeah, I would put it actually at this step 3 on sourcing, which is diversifying your supplier base, looking into whether you can have other options for when that, if they're not going to be able to find someone, who else you can work with. I know in the nonprofit world, it can be a little more challenging because of a variety of factors. But
Right.
when it
Let me
comes
ask
to
you.
your vacancy, I would think of who are the other sort of vendors, which are really the nonprofits for you, that could fill those units for you, and then thinking about the lead times with which you get the knowledge from them that they're going to want to fill that spot.
Gotcha. So if hypothetically speaking, at the first of every month, I say, hey, these units are available, and they let me know within a few days, hey, we're doing some intakes. We should know by Friday. So if the first was on a Monday and that was on a Friday, are we considering that sort of the lead time?
Yeah, I mean, technically the lead time is the time from when you order it to when it shows up, but there,
Oh, gotcha.
same principle though, right?
Okay.
And yeah, and then if you have another supplier in a backup supplier or a backup nonprofit or source of tenants, then you can bring in additional material, or
Gotcha.
you know what I mean? And just sequencing that so that you have a process that you're following rather than just being reactive to the nonprofit and whether or not they have people for you in that 30 days that you're looking at.
Gotcha. So if we look at suppliers like, say, also because it's just relatively short term in terms of rental, on the offshoot that off chance that I'm not using the spaces, I'm looking at, say, Airbnb or applying for licensure with the state for
Yeah,
group homes or any of these other avenues. That's what you're referencing in terms of diversity of supplier. The
that's
avenue
exactly
in
what I
which
mean.
okay, got it. I understood. That was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Google Forms is definitely a great way to get client feedback. You can set up a form for free. You could set up the Net Promoter Score question or a couple of other short questions, and that allows you to track it over time as well. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, David, it seems to me though that people kind of universally understand NPS. So even if you want to survey your customers about more topics, you should still do like a separate NPS so that you
I
can
like
like
MPS.
talk the same lingo that other people do. But if you really want to understand what they liked or disliked about whatever it was that you did for them, whether it was a service or a product, then you're probably going to get a more detailed form going.
That makes sense.
And we've got two people with raised
Joel?
hands. So yeah, go ahead and call on Joel.
Hi, David. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, our business now is a graphic design business servicing the needs of manufacturers. And we've been at it for some time. We now want to pivot and start to manufacture a product that we design. And after a long period of time, we were able to identify a manufacturer overseas. So we have actually started already two products of a big collection that we plan to have in the future. But the two products, they would only agree to doing the product development work with us and the sampling and everything if it's backed up by a minimum order quantity. And the minimum order quantity for each product is 10,000 units. So we have actually used our own resources to order that. And by the end of April, we will be having 10,000 each of two products. And the product I'm talking about are disposable paper plates.
Okay.
So I know we need to increase the product collection for it to be really more noticeable in the market, but we would do our best to introduce this in several ways to the customers that we are targeting. But my question is, if we keep on doing this, like we will be overwhelmed with big amount of inventory, and almost all the manufacturers we spoke with would always assert that minimum order quantity because the product to them is new. So how do you build that system?
So pre-sales can be useful in this case. If you can find customers that agree to it, depending on your lead time of getting that product from overseas here and to your customers, if you can find customers that are willing to sign up in advance, it can smooth out your planning cycle quite a lot. Second would be stepping up your marketing and trying to generate more demand. I didn't touch on marketing too much here or sales, but going back to the planning slide here, figuring out, having a sense of a goal for what you sell in a month will help you to figure out when you need to order those plates again. And do you have a sense of who your customer is and what their
Yes, we do.
appetite would be for, and how many they would buy at a time?
Yes, we do. We're basing it on the number. It's a product we think is like customized to the needs of a certain minority group. Like we're starting with the Filipino community. We studied what they would react to in terms of elevating their experience using disposable paper plates. And we found out also that other Asian minority groups have the same experience to that. So that's kind of a target market that we are looking at.
How many paper plates would you sell at a time?
We plan to retail like 100 paper plate at one time and not do like smaller quantities. But
Okay.
we're still going to introduce these to trade fairs and other food-centered festivals so that they started to get used to it.
Yeah, so the minimum order quantity is about 100 orders from the individual.
For our retail, 100 at least. But from the manufacturer, is always 10,000 units minimum order quantity.
And have you sold any so far?
No, they haven't arrived yet.
Okay. Well, I think understanding how quickly you're going to sell them would be important. How long does it take for them to arrive once they arrive? From the time
Okay.
you order it to the time that you get them?
Yeah, on the average, 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah, because we're ordering from China.
Okay. Got it. So on my little diagram that I had on fulfillment, what you don't know yet is your demand per day and understanding what that is. Depending on the pace at which you want to be growing the business, you may want to stock up and try to go fast, but I would recommend that you wait for them to come in and then see how quickly you can sell them before you start placing more orders. If you can, Hesh had a good point in the chat that targeting restaurants and pre-selling, as I mentioned, could be a good way to stoke that channel, to lubricate the channel. But if you, without starting to actually sell the plates, it's hard to know what the right timing is in order to order more. So I would recommend get them in and start selling them, or while you're waiting, try to pre-sell some of the plates so that you can deliver them once they arrive.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. That was very valuable insight. Thank you.
Thank you. Annabelle?
Yes, good evening. I have something kind of I'm struggling with now. So when you have a product that has so many moving parts, like packaging, and sometimes you find yourself running into, let's say, deals that require you buying in bulk, just like he had mentioned, and you have need for more than one, and you really don't have a space yet.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate that? Is it advisable to get like a storage space for that? Because the goal is trying to save, but if I'm spending more just to save, I don't know if it's really,
Yeah.
can you kind of touch on that?
Yeah, I would, in terms of the deals on packaging where they're trying to get you to buy a lot in bulk, I would encourage you to not chase it, would be my main advice. Don't try to go after it. It's sort of this idea of try not to focus too much on unit cost and squeezing the lemons. Oftentimes, small businesses run into a lot of issues with that type of thing because they chase after a packaging deal and then something changes in the business and then they don't have a chance to use all of that. Like I have a friend who I've done some consulting for that she does holistic products like essential oils and scrubs and stuff. And she got a great deal on graphic designer and to make a logo, and then had a bunch of stickers made for that logo because it was a discount. But then that packaging just sat there because ultimately she decided she didn't want to go with that logo because she got some negative feedback on it from customers. So in general, I think hiring extra storage space makes sense if it's inventory that you're going to sell and you need the space because of stocking up, because of lead times and all that. But if you're just going after a short-term deal on packaging, I would advise you to just not chase that specific deal.
Okay, thank you. Because that's been one of the things that I've worried about, because if I spend money getting it and I don't, because we don't have that volume yet, so you're not moving product as quick as you would love to, you just that sitting. And like you said, what if the packaging changes? What if the need changes? What if, and those were the things that kind of was physically bothering me, to say the least.
Right. Yeah, you don't want your inventory to be stagnant, whatever it is, especially packaging, but really any part of your inventory. You want it to be a continuous flow. And that's not even so much on the perishability aspect, although that's true in the food space. It's because you want to be keeping up with demand and with what you're selling. So stocking up on a whole bunch of packaging before it's proven might not necessarily be the best idea. It gets to the same idea of measuring in days. So if that much packaging is going to last you 3-4 days, then yeah, it makes sense. But if your business isn't at that scale yet, then you're incurring a lot of risk by going out and signing a deal just on that packaging.
Thank you.
Sophia, did you still have a question?
Yes, I did. Okay, so I heard you talking about forecasting. So I know in fashion, we do forecasting for the different styles and trends and things like that. So would that kind of tie into the same type of forecasting that you were referring to?
Yeah, for sure. I think fashion is an interesting example of highly variable forecasting.
Okay. And then do you know of any types of apps or anything that would help with that?
For forecasting,
Yes.
there's a lot out there. I like Chainalytics, is a company that makes a suite of software products. Really, for what a lot of the incubator businesses are going to be doing, just a 3-month rolling average in Excel is probably good. But there's lots of stuff out there depending on how sophisticated that you want to get with it.
Okay.
What's your business?
I sell t-shirts for women, high-end t-shirts for women.
Okay. And does it change a lot every season?
Yes, it does. It changes a lot.
Right. So it's probably a good example of, on the slide here, the high variability. So for the very hard to predict stuff, it often is more qualitative when you go out to forecast, and it's more about talking to people. So one forecasting technique you might think about is running surveys and trying to, like, even you can use Google Forms and do it for free if you can find contact lists, but trying to get information that way rather than relying on past sales, which is more of a technique for businesses that are less variable than what you're talking about.
You know, I recently just did a survey with the Google Forms, and it actually showed me a lot.
Hey, nice. I bet. Yeah.
So yeah, it was cool. Okay. So I'm on the right track then.
I think so.
Okay, well, thank you so very much. This was amazing.
So much information. I mean, you had 5 different topics with 5 different things. Like, that's 25 pieces of actionable stuff,
Yeah.
and some of them were more than one. So yeah, everybody has their work cut out for them.
Yeah, feel free to reach out if anyone has questions on anything. Like I said, I am a supply chain consultant by day, but I'm a mentor by night for Incubate Vegas, and I really love helping. So feel free to reach out if there's anything I can do. Happy to help.
Thanks so much, David. And we're hoping that we're going to see you on Wednesday so that you can help give some feedback on our pitch practice.
I'll be there.
Okay. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, David.
Thank you.
Bye.